We just saw the weirdest end to the season we've ever seen. Fights are breaking out left and right, even between teammates. Guys are playing 83 games. Players are breaking their hand punching walls. Peyton Pritchard is dropping a triple-double. Guys that look like this are dropping 42. The oldest player in the league's dropping 24. Guys named Julian Champagny and Landell Wigington are averaging 20 a game. Thanasis Antetokounmpo is outscoring his brother. NBA players are going at it on Twitter. We even just saw the fastest foul in NBA history. What is going on? Last summer, the Timberwolves decided to give up one of the craziest packages we've ever seen for a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert. It was an extremely questionable fit, an egregious trade, but still the expectations were pretty high. And well, this season hasn't gone quite as planned. To close the year, they were fighting to stay out of the play-in, and that seemed to have caused some tension.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Gobert is punching his own teammate in a game with huge playoff implications. The Timberwolves end up sending him home, and now it's come out that he won't even be traveling with the team to play the Lakers in the play-in. The Timberwolves gave up their entire future for a player that led them to a worse record than a year ago, and now he's going to be sitting at home during the play-in. This was already a hilarious situation, but Twitter did some digging, and it just made this situation even funnier. Before the season, one of the biggest stories in basketball was Draymond Green punching his own teammate Jordan Poole in practice. On the same day the video hit Twitter, Rudy Gobert decides to tweet out, "Insecurity is always loud," obviously subtweeting Draymond Green. And well, last night, Gobert's punch is all over Twitter, and Draymond Green just couldn't help himself, firing off a tweet saying, "Insecurity is always loud." The NBA truly is the greatest reality show on the planet. Then we see another Timberwolves player take out his frustration with a punch. This time it's Jaden McDaniels punching a wall. He ends up injuring his hand. This team is a disaster right now. And just when we thought we saw it all, we have more teammates fighting each other. The Clippers had a lot riding on the last few games of the season. A couple bad games, and they could be in the play-in. The pressure was on, and following a bad stretch on defense, Mason Plumlee, someone who takes pride on that end of the floor, gets into it with Bones Highland. Now, something to take into consideration with this scuffle is that these two barely know each other. They've only been teammates for a couple months. They were both new additions at the trade deadline. With Paul George's health being a question mark coming into the playoffs, the Clippers just can't afford for the team chemistry to be this off. There's been tension across the entire Western Conference, and it's blatantly clear why. Right now, just 3 games separate the 3rd seed from the 9th seed. No one's been able to feel comfortable. For teams like the Mavericks and Thunder, it felt like the playoffs started weeks ago. For those two teams, it came down to the wire for the last play-in spot in the Western Conference. Every game that went by, the scenario was completely changing. The Mavericks went into their game Friday night against the Bulls, still having a chance to make the play-in. All they needed was to win the next 2 games and have the Thunder fall to the Grizzlies a couple days later. The line opened with them as massive favorites. The Bulls already had their play-in position locked, and losing meant nothing to them with their first-round pick going to Orlando. But then in a matter of minutes, the line completely changes. It's now a pick'em. What is going on? Then we see it. Luka Doncic is only going to be playing the first quarter against the Bulls. Oh, and everyone else who's somewhat competent won't even play. The game was closer than they wanted, but they still managed to lose that game. They then closed out the season with another loss to the Spurs. Now, why did they give up on their season? Well, it just might have saved their future. See, New York has the Mavericks first rounder this season from the Kristaps Porzingis trade, but there's a top 10 protection. They win those final 2 games, they go into the lottery tied for the 11th best odds at best. The only way they're keeping their pick is if they somehow get inside the top 4. They lose those games, now they're at the 10th spot, meaning as long as the 4 teams behind them don't jump all the way to the top 4, they're going to be keeping their pick. In retrospect, it was a brilliant move. The Thunder won out. They could not have made the play-in. Everyone was talking about this situation. The team that was in the Western Conference Finals last season, a team that traded for superstar point guard Kyrie Irving at the deadline, collapsed and just decided to give up and look to the draft. It was too much to ignore, and the NBA had to release a statement saying they launched an investigation into the Mavericks' roster decisions, game conduct, and motivations behind the Mavs-Bulls game. Okay, I get it. You don't want to see tanking. That's why you put the play-in in. That's why we have these new lottery odds. But the Mavericks are far from the only team doing this. In fact, this is nothing compared to some teams. See, when you have a prospect that is 7'4", lightning quick, and has handles like a guard, a guy that can put back dunk his own 3-pointer, teams will do some freaky things to get their hands on him. Suddenly, everyone on the roster is questionable with Wembanyama. On March 8th, over a month ago, the Blazers were coming off a 1-6 stretch. Reality set in, their season was over. Now, while the playoffs weren't in the picture, they were far from securing a top pick in the draft, so they decided to shut down everyone, and I really mean everyone. Lillard, Simons, Nurkic, Cam Reddish, and Keon Johnson were apparently too good and even hit the bench. The rotation was flooded with 10-day contracts. They decided to let their rookie Shaedon Sharpe run the show. He went off, but even he was too good and got benched for one of the last games. In a recent game against the Spurs, they put out a lineup of John Butler Jr., Trendon Watford, Drew Eubanks, Skylar Mays, Jonathan Williams, Justin Minaya, Jabari Walker, Shaquille Harrison, and Kevin Knox. Quite possibly the worst lineup the league has ever seen. They were just signing the worst players they could think of that still had an agent they could call. The Mavericks gave up a couple games, the Blazers gave up nearly a month, and it worked. They went 2-15 to close the season and now sit with the 5th best lottery odds. They're going to have an 11% chance at landing Wembanyama. Teams like the Utah Jazz were a little later to the party, but they joined in. By the end of the year, they just sat back and let former NBA bust Chris Dunn lead this team. They were letting Talen Horton-Tucker just chuck up shots, averaging 23 a game on gross efficiency. Rookie Agbaji was doing whatever he wanted. We had names like Simone Fadaccio, Johnny Juzang, and Micah Porter out there. In this wild final lottery push, we've had a guy named Jay Scrubb taking the court for Orlando. Gabe York is taking the court in Indiana. A certified bust Johnny Davis is getting 36 minutes in Washington. Jay Huff is rounding out their rotation. Some guard named Jalen Green is playing in Houston. San Antonio is being led by some dudes named Julian Champagny and Sandro Mamukela-Shabili. I think that's as close as I'm going to get with those names. Now, Julian's been kind of going off. He's averaging 20 points, shooting 45% from 3. One of the many guys turning heads in the last couple weeks. It's not just teams in the lottery that are putting out weird lineups. We've gotten to the point where teams are just not taking chances. If winning or losing doesn't mean anything, rotations are flipping on their head. Now, it's not quite to the level of these lottery teams, but take, let's say, the Knicks. Julius Randle goes down with an ankle injury, but their playoff position was relatively comfortable. Suddenly, we're seeing things like Jalen Brunson out with right hand maintenance. Now, this actually ended up giving us and the league an opportunity to see something from the Knicks that completely changes the outlook of not only their future, but potentially their chances in the playoffs. Emmanuel Quickley just averaged 28 points and 6 assists, shooting 48% from 3 in the last 7 games. Quentin Grimes is averaging 22 points, shooting 48% from 3 on 10 attempts in the last 9. Both these guys make big impacts defensively as well. Some of these games were with RJ Barrett, who was overshadowed to say the least. Their top pick from a few years ago, Obi Toppin, has been averaging 24 on crazy splits in the last few games. We all know these are unique circumstances, but guys like Quickley and Grimes have been great all season in smaller roles. In the last few days of this season, excluding a couple teams in the play-in mix, everyone was rocking star-studded benches. The Miami Heat's Udonis Haslem is the oldest player in the league. He's practically a coach at this point. In 2018, he scored 8 points on the season. 3 years later, in 2021, he played 3 minutes the entire year. The other day, he led the Heat to victory over the Magic, scoring 24 points, even knocking down 3 threes. We are truly in an alternate universe. What a way to go out. That was potentially his final on-court action. The Grizzlies ended the year against the Thunder by giving Summer League sensation, the bowling ball Kenneth Lofton, 40 minutes. He goes out there and drops 42 points and 14 rebounds. Sit down Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. There is a new duo in Boston, Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser. In the final 2 games, they combined to average 52 points, shooting 54% from 3, taking 25 attempts a game. All 6'1" of Peyton Pritchard is dropping triple doubles. He put up 30 points, 14 rebounds, and 11 assists in a win against the Hawks. Lindell Wigington. He's averaging 21 points this week for the best team in the league. We've seen some weird final stretches, but this season is taking the cake.